Hey guys, quick question. How long do you think you'd last without being able to Google proper dinner etiquette, wash your hands with actual soap, or eat food that hasn't been seasoned with lead? A dinner party? An appetizer? Try waking up in Rome, 150 CE. You'll be lucky to make it through the fish course without poisoning yourself or accidentally insulting someone powerful enough to have you crucified before dessert. Tonight, we're not talking about noble senators reclining on marble couches while feeding each other grapes. We're talking about the dinner party from hell. The ones where social suicide comes with a side of actual suicide. The ones where your table manners could literally get you killed. So before you order takeout from your phone like the pampered time traveler you are, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Especially if you're eating while watching this. You might want to stop. Now dim the lights. Maybe light a candle that doesn't smell like rancid olive oil mixed with human sweat. Something you definitely wouldn't have in 2nd century Rome. Because we're about to go back to a time where dinner parties were gladiatorial combat disguised as fine dining, where every bite could be your last, and where social humiliation was served as the main course. Let's get into it. You wake up in your modest Roman apartment. It's dawn. The smell hits you first. Not coffee brewing, not bacon frying. It's the distinctive aroma of a city where 2 million people share plumbing that would make a modern gas station restroom look like a spa. Your stomach growls. You've been invited to a dinner party tonight. A real Roman cena. You think this sounds delightful. You're imagining something like a dinner party back home. Maybe some wine, some conversation, some laughs. You have no idea what's coming. First, you need to prepare. In your time, preparing for dinner means maybe taking a shower and putting on something nice. Here, preparing for dinner is like preparing for war, because in many ways it is war. You start with the baths, not your apartment bathroom. Those don't exist. You head to the public bathhouse where you'll spend the next 3 hours getting clean enough to be dirty again. The bathhouse is packed. Hundreds of naked Romans splashing around in what is essentially community soup. The water hasn't been changed in days. Someone's definitely urinated in it. Multiple someones. You can taste the salt, but you get in anyway. Because showing up to dinner smelling like yourself is social suicide. Literally. Romans have killed people for less. You scrape yourself down with a curved metal tool called a strigil. It's like a medieval ice scraper for human skin. You're not getting clean. You're just redistributing the dirt in more aesthetically pleasing patterns. The hot room makes you dizzy. The steam is thick enough to chew. Other bathers are discussing politics, business, gossip. Everyone's shouting to be heard over the echoing voices and splashing water. An elderly senator holds court in the corner, his wrinkled skin hanging like wet fabric. He's explaining why the emperor's latest tax policy will bankrupt the provinces. 3 younger men nod enthusiastically at everything he says. They look terrified. You realize something important. This isn't just bathing time. This is networking time. The deals being made in this steamy, naked soup will affect the empire. The whispered conversations between tile-scrubbing sessions will determine who lives, who dies, who gets promoted, who gets exiled. You're witnessing the Roman Empire being governed by nude men in a giant bathtub. After the baths, you need clothes. Not just any clothes, the right clothes. In Rome, your outfit doesn't just say who you are, it says who you're allowed to be. Your toga is a masterpiece of impractical engineering, 20 feet of wool wrapped around your body in a pattern so complex that rich Romans employ slaves whose only job is toga management. You're not rich enough for a toga slave. You spend an hour trying to wrap yourself correctly. The fabric keeps slipping. Every time you move, something comes undone. By the time you're finished, you look like you're wearing a bedsheet that's given up on life. But the toga isn't about comfort. It's about status. It's a walking billboard that announces your citizenship, your wealth, your right to exist in polite society. Without it, you're nobody. With it, You're somebody who can't move their arms. The sun is setting. Time to go. You arrive at the villa just as the other guests are gathering. The house is enormous. Marble columns, painted walls depicting gods doing things that would get you banned from social media. Gardens with fountains that cost more than most people's annual income. Your host, Marcus Flavius Maximus, greets you at the entrance. He's wearing a toga so white it seems to glow. His slaves have spent hours polishing him to an impossible shine. He looks like a statue that's learned to walk. "Welcome," he says, clasping your forearm in the traditional Roman greeting. His grip is firm. His smile is practiced. His eyes are calculating exactly how useful you might be to him. You're led into the triclinium, the dining room. It's not what you expected. No chairs, no table in the center. Just 3 large couches arranged in a U-shape around a low table. The couches are covered in silk that costs more than a year's rent. This is where you'll spend the next 6 hours. Lying on your side, propped up on your left elbow, trying to eat without choking, spilling, or accidentally insulting someone important enough to have you murdered. The seating arrangements aren't random. They're a complex social hierarchy mapped onto furniture. Where you lie determines your status, your importance, your right to speak, even your right to exist. The place of honor is the bottom right of the host's couch. The least important guests get relegated to the far ends of the side couches, where they can barely see the food and definitely can't hear the conversation. You're assigned a middle position on the left couch. Not terrible, not great. You're socially visible but not important. You're the dinner party equivalent of background music. You lie down awkwardly. The couch is harder than it looks. Your left arm immediately starts to cramp. You try to adjust your position and nearly fall off. A slave steadies you with the practiced efficiency of someone who's caught many falling Romans. The other guests are settling in around you. To your left is a grain merchant named Gaius Cornelius. He's sweating through his toga despite the evening cool. To your right is the wife of a military commander, Claudia Octavia. She's beautiful, bored, and radiating the kind of danger that comes with having too much money and too little to do. The conversation starts immediately. Not small talk, political talk, dangerous talk. The kind of talk that gets repeated to the wrong people and results in mysterious accidents. The emperor's new building projects are bankrupting the city, someone says. Everyone nods carefully. Agreeing too enthusiastically suggests treason. Not agreeing enough suggests treason. There's a narrow band of acceptable nodding, and you have no idea where it is. A senator across from you begins explaining why the Germanic tribes are becoming more aggressive. His analysis is detailed, informed, and probably seditious. Everyone listens with the kind of intense attention usually reserved for funeral speeches. You realize that Roman dinner conversation isn't conversation. It's a verbal minefield where every word could explode your entire life. The first course arrives. Gustatio. The appetizer course. Your modern brain thinks this means some light snacks before the real meal. Your modern brain is adorably naive. The slaves bring out dozens of small dishes. Peacock eggs dyed blue and gold. Dormice stuffed with pork and pine nuts. Sea urchins floating in wine sauce. Jellyfish salad garnished with rose petals. The peacock eggs look beautiful until you bite into one. The yolk is runny and tastes like concentrated ocean. The white has the texture of rubber that's given up. You force yourself to swallow while smiling appreciatively. The dormouse is worse. It's a tiny rodent that's been force-fed until it's obese, then cooked whole. You're expected to eat everything. Bones, organs, whatever that crunchy bit is that you're trying not to think about. Claudia notices your hesitation. "First time eating dormouse?" she asks with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. You nod, not trusting yourself to speak without vomiting. "They're raised in special jars," she explains helpfully. "Fed only nuts and berries until they're fat enough to cook. The emperor serves them at every state dinner." You take another bite. The bones crunch between your teeth. The flavor is like chicken that's been marinated in wet dog. You chew slowly, deliberately, while your stomach stages a revolt. The sea urchins are somehow worse. They're raw, slimy, and taste exactly like you'd expect something called a sea urchin to taste, like the ocean's revenge against anyone dumb enough to eat it. But you eat everything, because not eating suggests you're ungrateful. Being ungrateful suggests you're disrespectful. Being disrespectful suggests you don't belong here. Not belonging here suggests you should be somewhere else, permanently. The wine helps, sort of. Roman wine isn't like modern wine. It's thick, sweet, and mixed with honey, spices, and sometimes lead oxide for extra sweetness. The lead gives it a pleasant metallic aftertaste that's slowly poisoning your nervous system. But it does make the conversation more bearable. The political discussions become philosophical debates. The philosophical debates become drunken arguments. The drunken arguments become veiled threats disguised as poetry recitations. A young patrician named Lucius begins reciting verses about the glory of military conquest. His words are slurred, but his message is clear. The empire needs stronger leadership, more aggressive expansion, fewer compromises with barbarian tribes. Everyone listens politely. This is either brilliant political commentary or treason, depending on who's listening and what they choose to remember later. The grain merchant beside you whispers, "Lucius's father was executed for similar views last year." You realize you're not just attending a dinner party, you're attending a wake for political careers that haven't died yet. The second course arrives, prima mensa, the main event. You think this means the real food is finally coming. You're about to learn that Roman ideas about real food are fundamentally different from yours. The centerpiece is a whole roasted boar, its mouth stuffed with live thrushes that fly out when the animal is carved. The thrushes circle the room frantically while slaves chase them with nets. It's dinner and entertainment combined. One thrush lands in the wine bowl. Another flies directly into an oil lamp, catching fire briefly before plummeting into someone's soup. Everyone applauds as if this chaos is exactly what they ordered. The boar itself is stuffed with smaller animals, rabbits, birds, fish, all cooked inside the larger carcass like some kind of carnivorous Russian doll. The cook has achieved something that's either culinary genius or an elaborate crime against nature. Your portion includes what appears to be an entire small bird, bones and all. You're expected to eat around the bones, or possibly eat them too. The rules aren't clear, and asking would reveal your ignorance. Next comes the ostrich. Not ostrich meat, an entire ostrich, roasted and presented as if it died in a yoga pose. The neck extends 3 feet above the serving platter. The head has been replaced with a silver sculpture of the emperor's face. This is either artistic genius or the kind of fever dream that results from too much lead-sweetened wine, possibly both. The ostrich is carved with ceremonial precision. Each guest receives a portion appropriate to their social status. You get a piece from somewhere near the middle, which is either an honor or an insult. You're not sure which, and that uncertainty is terrifying. The meat is tough, gamey, and tastes like chicken that's been training for a marathon. You chew methodically while trying to look like you're enjoying a delicacy instead of suffering through what feels like an elaborate punishment. But the real challenge isn't the food. It's eating while lying on your side, propped up on one elbow, trying to maintain conversation with people who could have you killed for poor table manners. Every bite is a logistical nightmare. You have to balance the food, manage your toga, maintain your position on the couch, and look dignified while doing it all. It's like performing surgery while juggling. You drop a piece of ostrich. It lands on the silk cushion, leaving a greasy stain that probably costs more than most people's houses. A slave immediately appears to clean it up, but the damage is done. You've marked yourself as clumsy, careless, unworthy of fine things. Claudia notices, of course. The ostrich can be challenging, she says diplomatically. Even experienced diners sometimes struggle with it. You're not sure if she's being kind or establishing dominance. In Rome, kindness and cruelty often look identical. The conversation continues around you. Politics, philosophy, gossip, all delivered in the casual tone of people discussing the weather. Someone mentions that a senator was found dead in his bath yesterday. Apparent suicide. Everyone nods knowingly. Political suicide is so common these days, the host observes. Sometimes it's even voluntary. Everyone laughs. You're not sure if it's a joke or a threat. In Rome, the distinction isn't always clear. More dishes arrive. Flamingo tongues in sweet wine sauce. Eel cooked in its own blood. Something that might be fish but smells like it died weeks ago and was recently discovered behind a furniture piece. The flamingo tongues are exactly what they sound like. Actual tongues from actual flamingos, prepared as if they're some kind of delicacy, instead of a part of the bird that no reasonable person would consider eating. They're small, tough, and taste like concentrated bird. You chew carefully, trying not to think about the fact that you're eating the part of an animal that once made beautiful sounds. Now it's making your stomach make ugly sounds. The eel is worse. It's been cooked in what the chef proudly announces is its own blood, as if this is a selling point rather than a reason to call the health department. The texture is like rubber bands soaked in copper pennies. The flavor is indescribably awful. It's what you'd expect blood-soaked rubber to taste like if blood-soaked rubber had given up on life and decided to take you down with it. But you eat it, because refusing would be insulting the host. Insulting the host would be social suicide. Social suicide in Rome often leads to actual suicide, usually with helpful encouragement from people with swords. The wine continues flowing. Your head is starting to spin. The lead poisoning is kicking in, making everything seem slightly unreal, like you're watching the dinner party through a foggy window. The conversations are getting louder, more dangerous. Someone is questioning the emperor's military strategy. Someone else is defending it with the kind of passion that suggests financial interest. A third person is trying to change the subject before someone says something that gets everyone executed. You realize that Roman dinner parties aren't social events. They're elaborate forms of Russian roulette where the bullets are words and the gun is pointed at everyone simultaneously. A new guest arrives late. He's clearly important because everyone stops talking when he enters. The host jumps up to greet him personally, something he hasn't done for anyone else. The newcomer is introduced as Quintus Fabius Maximus, recently returned from military service in Germania. He's tall, scarred, and radiating the kind of controlled violence that comes from years of professional killing. He takes the place of honor on the host's couch. Everyone shifts slightly to accommodate his presence. The entire social dynamic of the room rearranges itself around him like metal filings around a magnet. Quintus begins telling stories from the frontier, not heroic tales of Roman glory. Brutal, honest accounts of what it's really like to maintain an empire through systematic violence. "We crucified 300 rebels last month," he says casually, reaching for the wine. "Left them up for a week as an example." The message was received. Everyone nods appreciatively. This is dinner conversation. Mass execution as an appetizer topic. The Germanic tribes are learning, he continues. They're organizing differently, adapting our tactics. It's becoming more challenging to maintain order. You realize you're listening to a military briefing disguised as social chat. The casual discussion of crucifixion and tribal warfare is someone's idea of light entertainment. The third course arrives. Secunda mensa, dessert. You're hoping for something simple, sweet, recognizable. You're about to be disappointed. The centerpiece is a replica of the Circus Maximus, made entirely from honey cakes and marzipan. Tiny sugar gladiators fight sugar lions, while sugar spectators cheer silently from sugar bleachers. It's impressive, beautiful, and completely insane. But that's just decoration. The actual desserts are more ambitious. Honeyed dormice, rolled in poppy seeds. Dates stuffed with ground peacock and garum. The fermented fish sauce that Romans put on everything the way you put ketchup on French fries. Cheese aged in wine and shaped to look like fruit, because apparently regular fruit isn't challenging enough. The honeyed dormice are the worst thing you've eaten yet, which is saying something considering the evening's previous offerings. They're sweet, savory, crunchy, and fundamentally wrong in every possible way. The dates stuffed with ground peacock are like eating candy that's been marinated in bird cemetery. The peacock adds a gamey flavor that clashes violently with the sweetness of the dates. It's what you'd get if someone tried to make dessert out of a zoo. But the cheese shaped like fruit is the most disturbing. Not because it tastes bad, though it does. Because it represents the Roman approach to everything. Why have something simple and good when you can have something complicated and confusing? The wine is really hitting you now. The room is spinning gently. The conversations are blending together into a background hum of political intrigue, military strategy, and social gossip, all delivered in the tone of people discussing gardening tips. Someone is reciting poetry, bad poetry about the emperor's divine wisdom and the glory of Roman conquest. Everyone listens with the kind of frozen attention usually reserved for hostage situations. The poet is young, earnest, and completely unaware that his verses are historically inaccurate, politically dangerous, and artistically catastrophic. He's the dinner party equivalent of someone singing karaoke who genuinely believes they sound good. But everyone applauds politely when he finishes, because not applauding would be rude. Being rude would be disrespectful. Being disrespectful could get you killed. So everyone claps for poetry that makes children's nursery rhymes look like Shakespeare. You're beginning to understand something fundamental about Roman society. It's not built on strength, intelligence, or even wealth. It's built on an elaborate system of mutual terror disguised as politeness. Everyone is afraid of everyone else. The host is afraid of his guests' political connections. The guests are afraid of the host's social influence. The servants are afraid of everyone. The soldiers are afraid of their commanders. The commanders are afraid of the emperor. The emperor is afraid of everyone. It's fear all the way up and fear all the way down, held together by wine, elaborate meals, and the shared pretense that everyone is having a wonderful time. The entertainment begins, not after dinner entertainment, during dinner entertainment, because apparently eating blood-soaked eel while lying sideways isn't challenging enough. Dancers enter the room, not the kind of dancers you might expect. These are trained performers who specialize in telling stories through movement. They're going to act out the rape of the Sabine women while you try to digest ostrich. The dance is athletic, artistic, and deeply disturbing. The performers are skilled, but they're portraying one of Rome's founding myths, which involves mass kidnapping and forced marriage presented as romantic comedy. You watch while trying to eat honeyed dormice and wondering if this is what civilization looks like, or if you've accidentally attended some kind of elaborate fever dream. The dancers finish their performance with a tableau that would get them arrested in most time periods. Everyone applauds enthusiastically. This is culture. This is sophistication. This is what separates Romans from barbarians. You're starting to think the barbarians might have better dinner parties. More entertainment arrives. A poet who specializes in satirical verses about current events. His material is brilliant, dangerous, and probably illegal. He's making jokes about senators, generals, and imperial policies with the kind of precision that suggests either genius or suicidal tendencies. Everyone laughs at his jokes while mentally calculating which ones they can safely repeat and which ones would get them exiled to some unpleasant island in the Mediterranean. The satirist finishes with a piece about the challenges of maintaining an empire that's grown too large to govern effectively. It's hilarious, insightful, and treasonous. Everyone applauds while wondering if they should report him to the authorities or hire him for their own dinner parties. You realize that Roman entertainment isn't entertainment. It's a form of collective risk-taking where everyone participates in dangerous activities while pretending they're having innocent fun. The evening is wearing on. You've been lying on your side for 4 hours. Your left arm is completely numb. Your right arm is cramping from trying to eat while propped up. Your back feels like it's been twisted into a pretzel and left in the sun. But you can't complain. Complaining would suggest weakness. Weakness would suggest you don't belong here. Not belonging here would suggest you should leave. Leaving would suggest you're ungrateful. Being ungrateful would suggest you're an enemy. So, you lie there, slowly losing feeling in various parts of your body, while pretending to enjoy what feels like an elaborate form of torture disguised as fine dining. The conversations are getting more philosophical. Someone is explaining why the old gods are better than the new mystery religions. Someone else is defending Christianity with the kind of quiet passion that suggests illegal activities. A third person is trying to change the subject before someone gets arrested for religious crimes. You realize that Roman dinner parties don't just risk political disaster, they risk religious disaster, social disaster, and personal disaster all at the same time. It's like playing multiple forms of Russian roulette simultaneously. A new dish arrives, something the cook proudly announces as his masterpiece. It appears to be a whole peacock that's been killed, cooked, and then reassembled with its feathers to look like it's still alive. The peacock sits in the center of the table, magnificent and dead, like a beautiful corpse at a very expensive funeral. Its jeweled eyes stare at nothing. Its colorful plumage rustles in the evening breeze from the garden. This isn't food, this is art. Disturbing, expensive, completely impractical art that you're expected to eat while maintaining polite conversation about politics and philosophy. The peacock is carved with ritual precision. Each guest receives a portion appropriate to their social status. You get a piece from near the tail, which includes actual tail feathers that you're not sure whether to eat or use as decoration. The meat is tough, stringy, and tastes like chicken that's been working out. It's not bad exactly, but it's not worth the elaborate presentation. It's definitely not worth the 3 hours of preparation that went into making a dead bird look alive. But you eat it anyway, tail feathers and all, because that's what Romans do. They eat impractical things in impractical ways while pretending it's the height of civilization. The wine is really affecting you now. The room is spinning slowly but persistently. The conversations are starting to sound like background music. Your host's face keeps shifting in and out of focus. You realize you might be dying, not from the food, though that's certainly a possibility, from the wine, which contains enough lead to build a small pipe organ. Your nervous system is slowly shutting down while your brain tries to process increasingly complex social situations. This is how Romans die, not gloriously in battle or peacefully in bed, slowly, at dinner parties, poisoned by their own sophistication. Someone is telling a story about gladiators, not the heroic version you've seen in movies, the real story about desperate men fighting to the death for the entertainment of people who've never held a sword. The storyteller describes the games in detail. The smell of blood and sand, the sound of metal on bone, the way the crowd screams for death with the same enthusiasm they're showing for dinner. The gladiators know they're going to die, he explains. The question isn't whether they'll die, but how they'll die, with honor or without it, bravely or desperately. You realize he's not just talking about gladiators, he's talking about everyone in this room, everyone in this empire, everyone who's chosen to participate in this elaborate system of mutual destruction disguised as civilization. The evening is reaching its climax, not because the meal is ending, but because the social tensions that have been building all night are finally reaching critical mass. Someone makes a comment about the emperor's recent marriage. Someone else defends the emperor's choice. A third person suggests that imperial marriages are political arrangements, not romantic ones. A fourth person implies that discussing imperial marriages at all is inappropriate. The conversation splits into multiple arguments happening simultaneously. Everyone is talking at once. No one is listening. The wine has loosened tongues and sharpened tempers. You watch this social explosion while trying to eat peacock feathers and wondering if this is how empires collapse. Not through military defeat or economic collapse, but through dinner parties that spiral out of control. The host tries to restore order by calling for more wine. This is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline, but everyone accepts the gesture because the alternative is acknowledging that the evening has become a disaster. Fresh wine arrives. Stronger wine. Wine tastes like it was made by people who've given up on life and decided to take everyone else down with them. You drink it anyway, because sobriety would make the situation even more unbearable than it already is. A musician arrives to provide soothing background music. He's carrying a lyre and wearing the kind of expression that suggests he's witnessed many social disasters and survived by playing quietly in corners. His music is beautiful, melancholy, and completely ignored by everyone. The arguments continue over his gentle melodies. The social combat intensifies while he provides a soundtrack that sounds like a funeral march for civilization itself. You begin to understand why the Roman Empire eventually collapsed. Not because of barbarian invasions or economic problems, but because the Romans exhausted themselves with elaborate social rituals that nobody actually enjoyed. The food keeps coming. More courses, more elaborate presentations, more dishes that require architectural degrees to understand and medical degrees to survive. A roasted swan stuffed with smaller birds, which are stuffed with fish, which are stuffed with eggs. It's like a carnivorous music box that someone has decided to eat. Jellied eels in wine sauce, brain pudding garnished with rose petals, something that might be liver but could also be a particularly aggressive mushroom. Each dish is more challenging than the last. Not challenging to eat, though they certainly are that. Challenging to understand, challenging to appreciate, challenging to survive without questioning your life choices. You're beginning to realize that Roman cuisine isn't about nutrition or pleasure. It's about demonstrating your willingness to suffer for social status. It's competitive eating as blood sport. The conversations have devolved into barely controlled hostility, disguised as intellectual debate. Someone is questioning someone else's military record. Someone is defending their business practices against implied criticism. Someone is reciting poetry that sounds suspiciously like veiled threats. You realize that Roman dinner parties aren't social events. They're gladiatorial combat with better table settings. Everyone is trying to destroy everyone else, while maintaining the appearance of civilized conversation. The host is beginning to look nervous. His carefully planned evening is dissolving into chaos. His guests are drunk, argumentative, and dangerously close to saying things that could get everyone in serious trouble. He calls for entertainment, desperate anything to distract his guests from their mutual hostility. A troupe of acrobats enters the room. They begin performing while the guests eat, drink, and argue. They're spinning, jumping, and balancing on each other while Romans debate whether certain military strategies constitute treason. It's like watching circus performers trying to distract children who are having a collective tantrum, except the children are adults with political power, and the tantrum could result in executions. The acrobats finish their performance to polite applause. The arguments resume immediately. The brief distraction has only made everyone more determined to prove their points. You're lying on your side, watching this social catastrophe unfold, while slowly dying from lead poisoning and wondering if this is what passes for fun in the Roman Empire. More wine arrives. Always more wine. Wine is the solution to every social problem in Rome. Feeling awkward? Drink wine. Feeling angry? Drink wine. Feeling like you might say something treasonous? Drink more wine and say it anyway. The wine is affecting everyone differently. Some guests are becoming philosophical. Others are becoming belligerent. A few are becoming unconscious, which might be the smartest response to the evening. The grain merchant beside you is explaining his theory that the empire is economically unsustainable. His analysis is detailed, accurate, and completely seditious. You're not sure if he's brilliant or suicidal. Claudia is debating religion with a military commander. Their discussion is becoming heated. She's defending the old gods. He's arguing for practical atheism. Neither position is particularly safe in current political circumstances. You realize that Roman dinner parties are where careers go to die, not through official actions or public statements, but through wine-fueled conversations that get repeated to the wrong people at the wrong times. The evening is reaching its natural conclusion, not because anyone wants it to end, but because several guests are approaching the point where they'll either pass out or start fighting. The host makes a final attempt to restore dignity to the proceedings. He calls for a toast to the emperor, the empire, and the eternal glory of Rome. Everyone raises their cups dutifully. The toast is elaborate, flowery, and completely hollow. Everyone knows it's performative patriotism designed to end the evening on a safe note. But even this simple gesture becomes complicated. Someone proposes a modification to the toast. Someone else suggests a different wording. A third person questions whether toasting is appropriate, given recent imperial policies. The simple toast becomes another argument. The argument becomes another social disaster. The evening ends not with dignified celebration, but with drunken Romans arguing about the proper way to honor an emperor they're all secretly criticizing. You realize that Romans can't do anything simply. Not eating, not drinking, not even toasting. Everything becomes elaborate, competitive, and unnecessarily complicated. The guests begin to leave, not gracefully or gradually, but in a confused exodus of people trying to escape before the social situation deteriorates further. You struggle to get up from the couch. Your legs are numb from lying sideways for 6 hours. Your left arm feels like it belongs to someone else. Your head is spinning from wine, lead poisoning, and the effort of maintaining polite conversation while witnessing social combat. Your toga has come partially unwrapped during the evening. You look like you're wearing a bedsheet that's given up on life and decided to embarrass you in public. The host thanks you for coming with the kind of forced enthusiasm that suggests he's already planning ways to avoid inviting you to future events. You thank him for his hospitality with the kind of fake gratitude that suggests you're planning ways to avoid accepting future invitations. You stumble out into the Roman night. The streets are dark, dangerous, and full of people in various states of dinner party recovery. Some are being carried by their slaves. Others are supporting themselves against walls. A few have given up entirely and are sleeping in doorways. This is what Roman social life looks like. Not the dignified gatherings you imagined, but elaborate endurance contests disguised as entertainment. You make your way home through streets that smell like a combination of sewage, cooking oil, and human desperation. The city never sleeps, but it frequently passes out drunk in public places. Your apartment is a relief after the villa's elaborate horrors. Simple furniture, no complicated social hierarchies, no one trying to poison you with exotic food or dangerous conversation. You collapse onto your simple bed, still wearing your partially unraveled toga, and try to process what you've experienced. You've survived a Roman dinner party. Barely. You've eaten things that no reasonable person would consider food. You've participated in conversations that could get you executed. You've witnessed the social rituals that hold together an empire built on systematic violence and mutual terror. And you've realized something important. Roman civilization isn't civilized. It's barbarism with better table settings. It's savagery disguised as sophistication. It's a system where people slowly poison themselves with lead-sweetened wine while debating the finer points of crucifixion technique. You drift off to sleep, wondering how long this empire can survive when its social gatherings are more dangerous than its military campaigns. You dream of simple meals eaten sitting upright in chairs, of conversations that don't risk execution, of wine that doesn't contain industrial metals, of dinner parties where the biggest risk is social awkwardness, not actual death. You wake up the next morning with a hangover that feels like lead poisoning, because it probably is lead poisoning. Your mouth tastes like you've been chewing on ancient Roman plumbing. Your stomach feels like it's staging a revolt against everything you ate last night. But you've survived. You've experienced Roman high society and lived to tell about it. You've eaten dormice, debated politics, and witnessed the social rituals that define an empire. And you never want to do it again. You spend the morning trying to recover from your cultural experience. Recovery involves a lot of water, some simple bread, and a solemn promise to yourself to avoid Roman dinner parties in the future. But you know you'll probably get invited to another one soon, because Roman social life is like Roman military campaigns. Brutal, expensive, and impossible to avoid if you want to maintain your position in society. You realize that being Roman isn't about citizenship or culture or civilization. It's about surviving elaborate social rituals that test your ability to endure suffering while pretending to enjoy yourself. It's about eating terrible food with good humor, drinking poisonous wine with enthusiasm, engaging in dangerous conversations with diplomatic skill, maintaining your dignity while lying sideways on a couch for 6 hours. It's about proving that you're tough enough, smart enough, and politically savvy enough to deserve your place in an empire that's slowly collapsing under the weight of its own elaborate complications. You look out your window at the bustling Roman streets below. People are going about their daily business with the same determination you witnessed at the dinner party. Everyone trying to survive another day in an empire that's beautiful, sophisticated, and completely insane. A messenger arrives at your door. Another invitation, another Roman dinner party, this time hosted by someone even more important than Marcus Flavius Maximus. You stare at the elegant scroll with growing horror. The invitation is written in perfect Latin on expensive papyrus. It's addressed to you personally. It's an honor that could advance your social position significantly. It's also potentially a death sentence disguised as fine dining. You realize you have a choice. Accept the invitation and risk another evening of social combat, exotic poisons, and political landmines. Or decline and risk being labeled antisocial, ungrateful, and possibly treasonous. In Rome, there are no good choices, only different ways to risk your life. You accept the invitation because refusing would be worse, because Roman society operates on the principle that participation in dangerous social rituals is better than exclusion from them. The second dinner party is even more elaborate than the first. The host, Gaius Julius Valerius, is a senator with connections to the imperial court. His villa makes Marcus's house look like a modest apartment. The guest list includes people you've only heard about in whispered conversations, military commanders who've conquered entire provinces, merchants who control trade routes across the empire, aristocrats whose ancestors helped found the city. You're clearly the least important person present. Your seating assignment confirms this. You're relegated to the far end of the least prestigious couch, where you can barely see the food and definitely can't hear most of the conversation. But you can observe, and what you observe is terrifying. These aren't just Romans having dinner. These are the people who actually run the empire. The decisions being made between courses will affect millions of lives. The casual conversations over wine will determine the fate of entire provinces. You're witnessing the Roman Empire being governed by people who are slowly poisoning themselves with lead while eating the intestines of exotic animals. The food at this dinner party is even more extreme than the last one, not just because it's more expensive, but because it's more symbolically significant. The appetizer course includes lark's tongues in honey, nightingale's brains in wine sauce, and something the chef proudly announces as the rarest delicacy in the empire. You're afraid to ask what makes it so rare. The lark's tongues are exactly what they sound like. Tiny bird tongues that have been harvested individually and prepared as if they're precious gems instead of organs that once enabled beautiful songs. They're so small, you need several to make a single bite. They taste like concentrated bird, with a texture like tiny rubber bands. You're eating the vocal cords of creatures that once filled the air with music. The nightingale's brains are worse, much worse. They're served in individual shells like some kind of cerebral appetizer. You're expected to crack them open and eat the contents with a tiny spoon. The brains are grey, mushy, and taste exactly like you'd expect brains to taste. Like death with a wine reduction. You force yourself to swallow while wondering what kind of civilization considers this fine dining. But the rarest delicacy is the worst of all. It turns out to be the liver of a fish that's been fed exclusively on human waste for 6 months. The chef explains this proudly, as if he's describing a culinary breakthrough instead of something that should be reported to health authorities. The liver tastes like what it is, fish that's been marinated in sewage. It's the most disgusting thing you've ever eaten, and you're expected to compliment the chef on his innovation. You realize that Roman haute cuisine isn't about taste or nutrition. It's about proving your willingness to eat literally anything, if it's expensive and rare enough. It's competitive consumption as a form of social warfare. The conversations at this dinner party are even more dangerous than the food. These guests aren't just discussing politics, they're making politics. The words being spoken around you will become imperial policy. A military commander is explaining why the empire needs to expand into new territories. His arguments are compelling, strategic, and will probably result in hundreds of thousands of deaths. Everyone nods thoughtfully as if they're discussing garden design. A merchant is proposing new tax policies that will fund the expansion. His calculations are precise, practical, and will bankrupt entire cities. Everyone agrees that his proposals are reasonable and necessary. A senator is suggesting reforms to the legal system that will streamline the process of dealing with dissidents. His recommendations are efficient, logical, and completely terrifying. Everyone applauds his innovative thinking. You're witnessing the casual planning of systematic oppression, military conquest, and economic exploitation, all delivered in the tone of people discussing dinner plans. The wine at this party is even more potent than the last one, not just because it contains more lead, but because it's been aged in containers that add exotic flavors and probably additional toxins. One wine has been aged in jars buried in Egyptian sand. Another has been flavored with pearls dissolved in vinegar. A third contains gold flakes that add a metallic taste and definitely aren't good for your digestive system. You're not just drinking wine, you're drinking liquid wealth, liquid status, and liquid death, all at the same time. The lead poisoning is affecting your perception. The room keeps shifting in and out of focus. The conversations sound like they're happening underwater. Your hands feel like they belong to someone else. You realize that Roman aristocrats aren't just ruling an empire. They're doing it while slowly dying from their own luxury. They're making decisions that will affect millions while their nervous systems shut down from heavy metal poisoning. The entertainment at this party includes gladiators, not professional entertainers. Actual gladiators brought in to fight for the guests' amusement while they eat. Two men enter the dining room carrying real weapons. They're going to fight to the death while you try to digest fish liver that was raised on human waste. The combat is brief, brutal, and completely real. One gladiator kills the other with a sword thrust that sprays blood across the marble floor. The winner stands over the loser's body, while the guests applaud politely. Slaves immediately clean up the blood while the meal continues. The dead gladiator is dragged away like garbage. The survivor is led out to await his next performance. You've just watched a man die for entertainment while eating the brains of songbirds. This is Roman civilization at its finest. The conversation resumes as if nothing happened. Someone compliments the host on the quality of his gladiators. Someone else suggests modifications to future combat presentations. Everyone agrees that dinner entertainment should be more interactive. You realize that Romans don't just accept violence. They've turned it into an art form. They've made killing into entertainment, oppression into policy, and suffering into sophistication. More courses arrive, each one more elaborate and disturbing than the last. A whole peacock stuffed with smaller birds, which are stuffed with fish, which are stuffed with insects, which are stuffed with spices that burn your mouth and probably your stomach lining. Roasted swan glazed with honey and gold leaf. The gold adds no flavor, but makes each bite cost more than most people's annual income. You're eating money while people outside are starving. Something that might be monkey brains but could also be an expensive cheese that's been sculpted to look like monkey brains. You're not sure which would be worse. Each dish represents not just culinary excess, but moral bankruptcy. These aren't meals. They're statements about power, wealth, and the complete disconnect between the rulers and the ruled. The guests are becoming more intoxicated and more honest. The careful diplomatic language is giving way to frank discussions of imperial policy that would be treasonous if overheard by the wrong people. Someone is explaining how to maximize tax revenue from conquered territories. Someone else is describing new techniques for suppressing slave rebellions. A third person is outlining strategies for eliminating political opponents without obvious violence. You're listening to the empire's management team discuss the technical details of oppression, exploitation, and systematic murder, all while eating food that costs more than most people will see in their entire lives. The host calls for a toast to the emperor's wisdom. Everyone raises their cups dutifully. But this toast is different from the previous evening's hollow gesture. These people actually influence imperial policy. Their toast isn't just ceremonial, it's a form of political coordination. The toast becomes a planning session. Each guest adds their own tribute to the emperor, but their words are coded messages about future actions, resource allocation, and strategic priorities. You realize you're witnessing the real government of the Roman Empire, not the public ceremonies and official announcements, but the private coordination between people who actually make decisions. The empire is being run by drunk aristocrats who communicate through elaborate toasts while slowly poisoning themselves with luxury food and beverages. Another gladiator match is arranged. This time it's 3 men fighting with nets and tridents. The combat is more complex, more technical, and just as fatal. 2 gladiators team up against the third. The outnumbered fighter is skilled but overwhelmed. He dies bravely but pointlessly while the guests bet on the outcome with the enthusiasm of people watching horse races. You're witnessing professional athletes being murdered for entertainment, while their audience eats exotic foods and discusses tax policy. This is what Romans consider a well-rounded evening. The bodies are removed efficiently. Fresh sand is spread over the bloodstains. The dinner continues as if nothing happened. Death has become so routine that it's barely worth acknowledging. You begin to understand something fundamental about Roman civilization. It's not built on strength, wisdom, or justice. It's built on the systematic dehumanization of everyone who isn't wealthy enough to attend these dinner parties. The Romans have created a society where human life has no value unless it's wealthy human life, where suffering is entertainment, violence is policy, and death is decoration for dinner parties. More wine arrives, stronger wine that's been prepared specifically to enhance the psychological effects of lead poisoning. You're not just getting drunk, you're being systematically neurologically compromised. The conversations are becoming more philosophical and more dangerous. Someone is questioning whether the empire can continue expanding indefinitely. Someone else is defending expansion as economically necessary. A third person is suggesting that internal consolidation might be more prudent than external conquest. These aren't academic discussions. These are policy debates between people who will implement whatever conclusions they reach. The fate of the empire is being decided by people who can barely focus their eyes. The evening reaches its climax with the presentation of a truly extraordinary dish. A whole elephant seal that has been transported from the distant shores of Britannia and prepared according to a recipe that took months to develop. The seal is enormous, expensive, and completely impractical. It serves no purpose except to demonstrate that the host has enough money and influence to transport massive marine mammals across the empire for a single meal. The meat is tough, fishy, and tastes like the ocean's revenge against anyone presumptuous enough to eat its largest inhabitants. But you eat it anyway, because refusing would suggest that you don't appreciate the effort and expense involved in bringing you ocean mammal from the edge of the known world. You realize that Roman cuisine has moved beyond food into the realm of performance art. Each dish is a statement about power, resources, and the complete absence of reasonable limits on what wealthy people will do for entertainment. The final course is dessert, but calling it dessert is like calling a nuclear weapon a firecracker. It's a reconstruction of the entire city of Rome, made from sugar, honey, and precious metals. Tiny sugar buildings line miniature streets. Honey rivers flow through marzipan districts. Gold leaf covers sugar temples dedicated to gods whose main function seems to be justifying imperial excess. You're expected to eat the city, to consume Rome itself as the final course of your meal. It's either brilliant symbolism or complete insanity, possibly both. The sugar Rome tastes like concentrated sweetness mixed with metallic flavor from the gold decoration. You're eating the empire, while the empire slowly eats itself from the inside, through lead poisoning, moral corruption, and systematic violence. The evening ends not with graceful departures, but with wealthy Romans arguing about military strategy, while too intoxicated to stand up properly. Several guests are unconscious, Others are being carried out by their slaves. You manage to leave under your own power, though your legs feel like they belong to someone else and your vision keeps splitting into multiple overlapping images. The streets outside are filled with the aftermath of multiple dinner parties. Wealthy Romans in various states of toxic recovery stumble through neighborhoods where poor people work night shifts to support the economy that provides exotic food for aristocratic gatherings. You see slaves cleaning up after their masters' social events, workers loading ships with goods that will be consumed at tomorrow's dinner parties, soldiers patrolling to maintain the order that makes these elaborate gatherings possible. The empire works because millions of people labor to support the lifestyle of a few thousand people who eat nightingale brains while planning military campaigns. You make it home somehow. Your apartment seems impossibly simple after the elaborate horrors of aristocratic dining. Plain food, clean water, furniture that doesn't require engineering degrees to understand. You collapse into bed still wearing your toga, which has become even more disheveled than after your first dinner party experience. You look like a bedsheet that's given up on dignity and embraced chaos. You dream of simple meals that don't require risk assessments, of conversations that don't threaten imperial stability, of entertainment that doesn't involve watching people die for amusement. You wake up the next morning with lead-poisoning symptoms that are becoming familiar. Headache, nausea, confusion, and the metallic taste that suggests your nervous system is slowly shutting down from Roman sophistication. But you're alive. You've survived 2 Roman dinner parties and gained insight into how the empire actually functions. You've seen the decision-making process that governs millions of lives. And you've realized that empires don't collapse because of external enemies or economic problems. They collapse because their ruling classes become so disconnected from reality that they lose the ability to govern effectively. They collapse because their leaders are too busy eating elephant seal and watching gladiators to notice that their civilization is falling apart around them. You spend the morning trying to recover from your cultural education. Recovery involves simple food, clean water, and the growing realization that Roman civilization is a performance designed to distract from the fact that it's fundamentally unsustainable. Another invitation arrives, this time from someone even more important. Someone with direct connections to the imperial family. Someone whose dinner parties probably include emperors, generals, and people who make the previous guests look like common citizens. You stare at the invitation with a mixture of honor and terror. Attending could elevate your social status to heights you never imagined. It could also kill you through exotic food poisoning, political intrigue, or simple nervous system failure from lead overdose. You realize that Roman social life is like Roman military service. The higher you rise, the more dangerous it becomes. Success isn't measured by survival, but by how spectacularly you're willing to risk death for status. You accept the invitation because declining would be worse than dying. Because in Rome, social death is worse than actual death. Because the empire's entire social system depends on people being willing to risk everything for the privilege of participating in its elaborate rituals. The third dinner party will be the most dangerous yet. Not just because the food will be more exotic or the wine more toxic, but because the guests will be the people who actually control the empire's destiny. You'll be dining with the people who decide whether provinces live or die, whether cities prosper or starve, whether entire populations are enslaved or exterminated. You'll be participating in the social rituals that hold together a system built on violence, exploitation, and the systematic dehumanization of everyone who isn't wealthy enough to eat songbird organs while discussing tax policy. But you'll also be witnessing history. You'll see how decisions are made that will affect the course of human civilization. You'll understand how power actually works in the ancient world. You'll learn that empires aren't governed by wise leaders making careful decisions in official settings. They're governed by drunk aristocrats making casual choices at dinner parties while slowly poisoning themselves with luxury. And you'll discover that surviving Roman civilization requires more than just adapting to different customs or learning new languages. It requires accepting that you're participating in a system that treats human life as entertainment, suffering as sophistication, and death as decoration. You look out your window at the eternal city, with its marble temples, magnificent forums, and engineering marvels that will inspire humanity for thousands of years. It's beautiful, impressive, and completely horrifying, because you now know what those magnificent buildings cost, not just in money or labor, but in human dignity, moral compromise, and the systematic destruction of everything that makes life worth living. You know that every marble column represents conquered peoples. Every golden decoration represents extracted wealth. Every architectural marvel represents the organized suffering of millions of people who will never see the inside of a Roman dinner party. And you know that you're going to keep attending these gatherings, not because you want to, but because refusing to participate would be worse than participating. Because Roman society doesn't offer good choices, only different ways to compromise your humanity. You understand now why the Roman Empire will eventually fall, not because of barbarian invasions or economic collapse, but because a civilization built on systematic dehumanization inevitably dehumanizes everyone, including its own elite. The aristocrats who run the empire are slowly killing themselves with their own luxury. The lead poisoning that makes their wine taste better is destroying their ability to think clearly. The exotic foods that demonstrate their wealth are literally toxic. The violence they use to maintain control is becoming the only language they understand. The suffering they inflict on others is becoming the only entertainment that can penetrate their growing emotional numbness. They're creating a system that makes everyone less human, including themselves. And systems like that don't last forever, no matter how magnificent their architecture or how sophisticated their dinner parties. But for now, the empire continues. The dinner parties continue. The slow poisoning continues. The systematic dehumanization continues. And you continue to participate because that's what survival requires in a civilization that's beautiful, sophisticated, and completely insane. You prepare for the next dinner party with the grim determination of someone preparing for battle, because in many ways that's exactly what you're doing. You're preparing to fight for your life using weapons like proper toga arrangement, diplomatic conversation skills, and the ability to eat literally anything without showing disgust. You're preparing to survive another evening in the company of people who control the ancient world while slowly destroying themselves and everyone around them through their pursuit of ever more elaborate forms of sophisticated barbarism. This is what it means to be Roman. Not citizenship or culture or military service, but the willingness to participate in elaborate rituals of mutual destruction while maintaining the illusion that you're representing the height of human civilization. And somehow, despite everything, the system works. The empire continues to function, the roads get built, the aqueducts deliver water, the legions conquer new territories. Because even a civilization based on systematic insanity can accomplish remarkable things if it's organized efficiently and has enough resources to waste on dinner parties where people eat nightingale brains while planning the conquest of Germania. The Roman Empire is simultaneously humanity's greatest achievement and its most elaborate form of collective suicide. And you're participating in both aspects, one dinner party at a time.